again, and this is part 6 of the series of sessions on the short story. In this part of the course, we're going to explore together the short story element of theme. Before we do just that, I would like to share with you how we're going to handle this session. We're going to divide this session into two parts. The first part will give some theory about the theme, what the theme means, its different levels of accessibility for the reader, whether it is direct or implied by the author. And then we move on to also talk about its different types in terms of how far-reaching a theme can be, whether it is universal or topical. And then we're going to end and conclude the first part, the theoretical part, with ways as how people, readers can identify the theme. Okay. When we're done with the first part, we will move to the second part of the session, and this is the application part, where we will have a short story, The Scarlet Ibis by James Hurst, and we're going to try to explore the thematic elements in it. We're going to explore the concepts and ideas that we have spoken about in the theoretical part in the short story. Let's move very quickly to the first part. Like I said, the first part is the theoretical part. If you happen to have the book with you, I want you to move all the way to page 129, where you have the mirror of the unit. Okay, remember, this session corresponds to unit 6 in your short story book, and the title of this unit is Focus on Theme, and this is what we're going to be doing. We will be focusing on the short story element of theme. So if you are on page 129 now, you have the mirror of the unit with its fixed sections. You have the background information part, which is section 1, where we have under this section you have what is the theme. We're going to explore what the theme means, themes in literature, and then how can we uncover the theme of a story. This is as far as the background information section is concerned, and then we move to the read part or section of the unit, where you have a short story featured, and the short story that we have, like I told you, is The Scarlet Ibis by James Hurst. We're going to engage in a bit of introduction about the Scarlet Ibis itself, as being a classic short story, and then we'll talk about even prior to talking about the Scarlet Ibis and prior to giving some introduction about it, I'm going to also tell you something about James Hurst himself and his place in the short story genre. And then we'll have questions before and after, and then after that you have the third section, which is exercises and activities, of course, based on and inspired by the reading of the short story that we have today. And then we're going to end up this part with the rounding up section. The rounding up section provides a subsection or a sub item called new terms, where the new terms that have been discussed and exposed and introduced in this unit will be highlighted. And then you have what have I learned in this unit item, which poses a number of questions in order, or a checklist that is meant to ensure full understanding of the different items and concepts and ideas in the unit. And then you have previewing for the next unit. Obviously, this part is going to be inactive for the simple reason that this is our final session. We don't have new units to to preview for. Okay. Let me share with you the objectives of the unit. Of course, we're going to meet the objectives of this unit over the course of the two parts that we will have. So the objectives of this unit are to illustrate how the different elements in a short story contribute to revealing the theme, and then to observe how a short story can have more than one theme, and finally to explore the theme in one short story, The Scarlet Ibis by James Hurst. Again, the featured and required reading for this session is The Scarlet Ibis by James Hurst. Okay, let's start. We're now starting the first part of session 6, like I told you, on the short story element of theme. We're starting with a working definition of the word theme. Obviously, there are lots of definitions and there are lots of contributions and input as what a theme means. Okay, a theme is as simple as getting with some kind of meaning and significance out of a short story that you have just read. Okay, so the idea that you come out with. So obviously, when a writer writes a short story, he or she, of course, he does not write it out of thin air, as it were. He doesn't write in a vacuum. He tries to communicate something to us. Okay, he has an idea and he wants to share with us. Okay, so based on this idea, he brings. If you still remember, last time we spoke about just that. We spoke about the how a short story writer can start a short story. And I think what Edgar Allan Poe said in this context is very valid and applicable here. He said that you have an idea as a writer. You have an idea. You have you have an effect of this idea in mind. Okay, so you have an idea, and you need to with the idea you need to reach or send or convey a certain effect to your reader. So the idea comes first, and then you have you start to weave, come up with events and characters and situations and settings in order to finally and eventually communicate the idea to the reader. Okay, so the idea that the different elements contribute towards achieving is what we call the theme. Okay, so the theme is basically the idea that we as readers come out with. Okay, so obviously you have to come up with an idea. You have to come up with something, some significance of a sort when you read a short story. Okay. Again, the theme is the idea or the main idea or the controlling idea. Of course, you can have one idea and you can have so many ideas depending on how big or small the short story you have, depending on how deep the short story is. Okay, so if you have if an idea is communicated to you or a message is communicated to you, so this means that that this is the theme or part of the theme that the writer is trying to send or communicate to us as readers. When we also talk about themes, we have to keep in mind that some themes are easily accessible. You can almost tell what kind of theme you have from the first few lines of a short story. Okay. Some short stories, some traditional ones, like for example fables, Aesop comes very readily to mind here, are very direct. Okay, you even before you finish reading the short story, you as a reader, can come up with the meaning of the short story, the significance and the message, and you are even helped by the author. Should an author exist, you are even helped. Like I'm telling you, in the fables of Aesop, you normally have towards the end of the fable, you have the message given to you. Okay, so Aesop has very interesting fables where you normally have animals, behaving in certain ways, and out of their behavior you cannot come up with the moral of the story. Okay, we have so many. Aesop has given us so many fables with very direct messages. You have the ant and the grasshopper, for example. You also have the dog and his reflection. You also have the fox and the grapes. Okay, and with every and each one of these fables, you have a moral to the story. Okay, so the characters, animals, of course, act in a certain way and behave in a certain way, and out of this behavior and out of the obviously the behavior leads to a certain end, and out of this end you as a reader can come up with an idea or two about what the correct behavior is. Okay, you normally have the characters in a fable mistakenly assuming things, behaving in a not very proper way. Okay, and this leads them to make mistakes and errors, and you as a reader, as an intelligent reader, is given the lesson that you shouldn't be behaving along the same lines. You should be adopting a different course of action if you're exposed to the same circumstances. Okay. What else about the? So again, some of the short stories have direct themes. Themes that you can identify right away. And in most of the cases, the theme is not given that easily in a short story. You as a reader has to it's like a puzzle where you have different pieces of the puzzle, and you have to put them together in order to come up with a solution for the puzzle. So the puzzle here would be the short story, and the different pieces of the puzzle would be the different elements of the short story. You have the characters, you have the plot, you have the point of view, okay, and you have the setting, of course. And when you put them together, you come up with a solution for the puzzle. The solution would be the theme, the idea that the writer is trying to communicate to the rest of us, to all of us. Okay. Let me. So again, I'll give you a number of statements, and I want you to tell me whether they give you details about the characters, they give you details about the plot, they give you specifics about the point of view, or what. Okay, I'll read them out loud, and then you tell me what they mean to you. Okay, so when I say for example, and this is page 130 again. Okay, small things can change great things. When I say that the adult world is indifferent to the individual, when I say that family and community ties are important, when I say that alienation, which means emotional isolation, can have devastating effects on the individual, when I say that great expectations will only lead to great disappointments. So what do you think these statements mean? What are they more or less linked to the plot, to the characters? Okay, so the answer is obviously no. when I say, for example, that small things can change great things, obviously it doesn't give you details about the plot. It's not about the events of, you cannot tell the plot out of reading this statement, because obviously this can apply to the plot, for example, of A Sound of Thunder. It can also apply to other plots and other short stories and other pieces of fiction. Okay. So when I say that the adult world is indifferent to the individual, so obviously it doesn't tell you about the characters of a given short story. Okay. It can apply to Arabic, and it can also apply to other short stories and other pieces of fiction. When I say that family and community ties are important, it doesn't give you much information about the setting of any short story. It doesn't give you any clues about the setting, for example, of A Letter from Gaza. See, it can apply to Gaza, and it can A Letter from Gaza can apply to other short stories. Okay, so so what I'm trying to say is that these statements are more or less conclusions and ideas and messages that you come out with when you read a short story. Okay, so when you read a short story, these labels can apply to these different short stories. Okay, so these statements are conclusions. Okay, are messages, are statements that you again think of after you have finished reading a short story. Okay, these statements are more or less what we refer to as the theme of a short story. Okay, when I say, for example, small things can change great things, this is actually one of the themes that the writer is communicating to us in A Sound of Thunder. When I say, for example, that the adult world is indifferent to the individual, this is obviously one among the so many themes that we have in Arabic. When I say, for example, family and community ties are important, this is one of the themes of A Letter from Gaza. Okay, alienation can have devastating effects on the individual. This is, again, it can be a theme or one of the themes of Arabic, and it can also one of the themes in A Letter from Gaza. Great expectations will only lead to great disappointments. This is also a theme that can apply very much to Arabic. Okay. So again, these are statements, these are conclusions, and you normally wait until the very end of a short story in order to arrive at. Okay. So of course you can have some kind of foreshadowing. You can almost tell from the first few lines about some possible themes in a short story. Okay, but it would be better if you just wait and then relate the setting to the characters, to the different events and incidents, the plot to the point of view, and then you put them together and come up with a statement that can spell out the theme for you. Okay. Okay. So this is basically the idea of a theme. Let me move with you to the idea of the different types of themes that we may have. Sometimes you have what I refer to as topical themes. Topical themes are themes that are confined and restricted to a given culture, okay, that do not move beyond the borders and boundaries of a certain culture, okay. or a certain language or a certain country. Okay, obviously the country of the language or the country of the author. And sometimes you have universal themes. I mean, themes that apply here and elsewhere, and can apply here in the Arab world, and they can also apply to people, apply to and appeal to people living in Japan, in the United States, in Nicaragua, in all the countries of the world. Okay. We normally refer to universal themes as big themes. They are big, and big, of course, not in terms of size, and in terms of their significance. Okay, in terms of how far-reaching they are, in terms of how appealing they are to readers belonging to different cultures and different languages and stuff. Okay. Universal themes are, when I say, for example, the theme of war, obviously war is universal. Okay, I mean, we have actually, this is very sad. I mean, war is all over the place. I mean, here in the Middle East and in Asia, in Europe, etc. So, I mean now and in the past and the future. I mean, obviously, war is inseparable from the human condition, as it were. So this makes it universal. Okay, but when you talk about a specific war, when you talk, for example, about the Second World War, when you have a short story whose background is the Second World War, you have, for example, a love story, and you have the Second World War in the background. This makes it topical, okay? Because of the gap between us as people in the 21st century, for example, and people living, for example, during the Second World War. It's not going to be as far-reaching as talking about the idea of war in general. Okay, wars in the past and in the present and also in the future. When I talk about the idea of love, okay, when I talk about love and a relationship, okay, so love is obviously very big and very universal. Love is everywhere in all cultures, always and everywhere. But when I talk about a given relationship, a specific relationship, this is obviously topical and it relates more to the surroundings and the setting where it started. For example, if I talk about two young people falling in love with each other in a given short story in the United States, in a certain city, so it's going to be very topical and very restricted to the area it came from. Okay. When I talk about the idea of jealousy, so jealousy is a human feeling that applies here, and it can apply in China, it can apply in Russia. Okay, so obviously jealousy is a universal theme. Okay, hate or hatred. Okay, when you talk, for example, about how small the population is in Canada, okay, and you have a short story writer in Canada addressing this problem in one of his short stories. Okay, so what do you think? This is obviously a small theme, is a topical theme that concerns only the people of Canada. Okay, so if as a reader in the Arab world, I wouldn't be very much bothered with what it means to have a limited amount of people living in a given place. Obviously, this is not a universal theme that can touch me, that can appeal to me. Okay, so this is also an example of a topical theme. So again, themes can be big, can be universal, applying here and elsewhere, can be applying in the 20th century, and they can also apply in the 16th on the 15th century, and you can have themes that are confined to the culture that produces them. Let me give you a very prime example of universal themes. Okay, if you look, for example, at the plays of Shakespeare, so you're going to find that most of his themes are universal. Okay, because they apply to his culture. We're talking about the 16th and the 17th century, and they also apply to I mean, what is happening now. Okay, so that's why we're saying that I mean, his plays could stand the test of time, and his themes are universal. Okay, the theme of jealousy, for example, in Othello. Okay, the theme of procrastination and not being able to take I mean, decisions upon the part of Hamlet in Hamlet is also universal, because it applies to, I mean, we have people around us, and maybe ourselves, who cannot take up or make up their minds about certain I mean, ideas and certain decisions and stuff like that. Okay. So this is as far as the idea of universality is concerned, whether talking about themes, whether themes can be universal or topical. Let's now move to so we talk about the let me so what I intend to do now is I'm going to read part of a short story, Arabic, that is, and let's try to identify the theme and explore the theme of the short story. Okay. So if you have the book handy with you, this is page 131. Okay. So again, let me stress this. You can have one main theme, and you can have some minor themes. You can, so sometimes you have in a short story, you can come up with only one theme, and you can have so many themes, but one of them stand out. Okay. So again, this is page 131. This is James Joyce, Arabic. And let's see whether I mean, the lines that I'm going to read out can tell you about the theme of the short story or not. Okay, so North Richmond Street, being blind, was a quiet street at the hour when the Christian Brothers School set the boys free. An uninhabited house of 2 stories stood at the blind end, detached from its neighbors in a square ground. This is the extract that I told you about. When you look deeply at the and very closely at the this extract, and you pay very special attention to the choice of words, you're going to come up with the idea that we remember. This is the very first few lines of the short story, and as we have said before, the first few lines of a short story can be very revelatory of what the short story is about. Okay, it can tell you a great deal about what direction the short story is taking. Okay, so again, when you read this part, you're going to come up, you're going to find, I mean, the choice of words, like I'm telling you, is very significant. So you have North Richmond Street being blind. Okay, so blind is obviously it's I mean, you have this play on the word word blind. Okay, I mean the writer is manipulating the word blind. Okay, so when you go to the dictionary in order to check the different entries of the word blind, you're going to find, so the default or the initial meaning would be blind. Blind means that you obviously you can't see. Okay, if you're blind, you can't see. Okay, and then you have the second meaning, which means that it's like a dead end. It's a street where the street is obviously blocked. Okay, there is no way you can go along the street and then move to okay, so you're going to be blocked at one point on the street. And this idea of blockage is obviously what the writer has in mind. Okay, so blind, obviously, with its first meaning, blindness to things. Blindness means the inability to like see things, and then you have the idea of blockage. When you put them together, and then you try to read on, and you also have words like uninhabited house. So if you have a house and you have characters or people in the house, it gives you a sense of liveliness, activity to it. So if I'm describing the house as uninhabited, it means that nothing happens in it. You have a sense of stagnation to it. You don't have. Everything is obviously moving to a standstill. And then you have blind end again. At the blind end, again, the end of the street is blind, which means it's blocked. And then you have detached from its neighbors, and we're talking about the house, and we're saying it is isolated from theirs. So when you put these words together, blind, and the insistence of the word blind, remember it is repeated twice, and then you have uninhabited, no sign of life, okay, and then you have detached. They all contribute towards a certain effect, an effect of paralysis, as it were, an effect of stagnation, inactivity, which is, of course, against the liveliness, against life. Life is about movement, is about living in places, about populating places. Okay, so the only sign of life is, of course, the boys when they are set free from the school. Okay. So what can this tell us? What can this tell us about the rest of the short story? It can, if anything, it can tell us that we are in for a short story where nothing happens, where there is an air of inactivity and stillness occupying center stage, as it were. Okay. When you read the rest of the short story, you are going to find that this effect that you came out with is reinforced in other parts of the short story. Remember, the boy and the fact that he lives with his uncle and aunt, and when you look at the description of the aunt and the uncle and how old in comparison, of course, and of course with the boy, and what kind of life they are leading, very mundane, drab kind of life. The uncle is always busy outside, and the aunt is not saying a lot of things to the boy, and she's dealing with him with some kind of she's suspicious of his every move. Okay. And then when the boy later goes to the Arabi, the bazaar, and all that happens is there. There is actually nothing happens. When he goes there, of course he has great expectations about the bazaar and the fact that he's going to, and even the title, if you still remember, the name of the bazaar means something. When he goes there, full of great expectations about what the bazaar has for him, in terms of romance, in terms of the gifts that he can buy for his lady love. When he goes there, he is, to his disappointment, of course, he all he sees there is two gentlemen, counting their coins, and a woman, and they are engaged in very petty conversations and talk. So there is nothing romantic about what they are saying. Okay, there is nothing active about what they are saying and what they are doing. This is also this contributes to the idea of stagnation and paralysis that we were promised in the very first few lines that we have read together. Okay, so if anything, the different parts of the short story, the incidents and events in the short story, the choice of words, the choice of the setting, can tell you a great deal about the theme of a short story. Let's now move to something else, which is how we as readers can identify the theme of a short story. Okay, so the clues that we are supposed to piece together to come up with the theme. Okay, so assuming that the theme is not given to us very in a very straightforward way in a short story. Okay, and this is like I'm telling you, in most of the cases you're not given the theme very directly and very explicitly. You have to earn it, as it were. You have to fight in order to come up with it. And fighting here means that you need to go the extra mile, as it were. You need to piece the different parts of the puzzle together in order to come up with the big picture. And what are these different parts of the puzzle that we will try to put together in order to come up with the theme? And this is what I'm going to share with you now. So the parts of the puzzle, assuming that so the puzzle is the short story, and the solution for the puzzle would be the theme, and the different parts of the puzzle would be, first of all, the plot. Okay, so ways as how you as a reader can identify and uncover the theme of a short story. The plot, this is number one. The title, okay, the title can tell you a great deal about the theme. Symbols in a short story, on short stories, and the other different kinds of literary writings are replete with symbols. Okay, symbolism features very prominently in literature. So you have the plot, you have the title, you have symbols, you have allusions. And allusions are references to places, references to people, references to history, references to religion, mythology. Okay, so you normally have allusions, and they can also tell you about the theme or themes. Um, Metaphors can also tell you about the theme. Similes, okay? So these are ways as how you can identify the theme of a short story. So again, let me read them or share them with you again. So you have the plot, you have the title, you have symbols, and you have allusions, metaphors, and similes, okay? So when you reflect on them while and after you have read the short story, they can help you arrive at the theme or themes of a short story, okay? So again, let's take them one at a time. Let's start with the plot. So can the plot tell me about the theme? Absolutely. So again, let's go back to the idea of having a theme or an idea in mind, and then you weave, you come up with events and incidents as a writer, of course, and then you try to weave them together in order to reach the effect that you have, in order to communicate the idea with its effect. Okay, so that plot is very significant, and it can tell you. So you need to, while reading the short story, you need to take stock of what happens and why it happens and how it happens. Okay. And we have different examples. If you look at for example, Jack London's To Build a Fire. So the plot is crafted in such a way that it gives you the conclusion that you normally come out with reading the short story. Okay, so the plot is more or less a statement, and it tells you about the eternal struggle between man and nature, man capital M and nature capital right? So this is, how could you come up with this statement or this conclusion unless you had these different details about the plot in the short story? You're having a man who decides against the good advice of people to go it alone and travel on a freezing day in the Alaskan desert, and weather is bad and he's alone and everything. These are elements of the plot that will help you towards the end come up with the conclusion that obviously if you're pessimistic enough, that nature is not very helpful, that nature is at best indifferent to human wishes, the futility of human endeavors, okay, and stuff like that. And they can also tell you about other more benevolent ideas and themes. The idea of having to listen to the advice of other people, especially the elderly. You have to be wise in your decisions, right? Okay, these are ideas and themes that you arrive at reading the different events and incidents in the short story. And the different events and incidents in the short story are what we refer to as the plot, right? The same applies to Thank You Ma'am. Think of Thank You Ma'am, for example, and what happened, and the different specifics and events. And at one point, for example, you were very amazed and surprised as how Mrs. Lula or Mrs. Jones is dragging the boy to her house Why this insistence? Okay, you either turn him over to the police or let go of him, release him. See, but the writer is um, giving us other details about her insistence to in driving him and dragging him to her house in order to for us to come up with the idea that it was all in his best interest, and there she is going to give her a practical lesson in forgiveness and giving other people the benefit of the doubt. And had she turned him over to the police or released him, she wouldn't have given him the lesson. She wouldn't have given us as readers the lessons of benevolence and giving people, other chances. Okay, so again, these are all incidents that that when you put together, you come up with certain messages and ideas, and these are all parts of the plot. Let's move to the title. Again, the title, as I was telling you, is very significant, and it can tell you a great deal about the theme or themes of a short story. And we have plenty of examples in the short stories that we have there. Okay? Think of the title of Thank You, Ma'am, for example. You're reading a short story whose title is Thank You, Ma'am. So what can the title tell you about the short story? So thank you means that somebody somehow is grateful to somebody else, right? So you have a level of appreciation of a sort, okay? So you're going to be on the lookout about this thank you, okay? When you read the short story. Thank you. And ma'am. And like I told you, ma'am is a way of addressing a woman in an informal setting. So obviously, somebody is grateful to somebody else, and this somebody else happens to be a woman. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so you can base your you can base a lot of conclusions on this even before you read. You can come up with the idea that you can even weave your own story. You can come up with your own plot. Okay. So that title can tell you about just that. Okay. Think of A Letter from Gaza. If the title of the short story is A Letter from Gaza by Ghassan Kanafani, so what do you think the short story can be about? What kind of theme or themes the short story can promise us from the title? So a letter, so obviously it's a letter, so the short story, like we have seen, is all written against the background of a letter. Somebody living in Gaza is sending a letter to somebody else in California. Okay, so possible themes before even reading is that the letter can be a letter by all the inhabitants of Gaza, by Gaza itself, to the people of the world as represented by somebody in California, as if Gaza was appealing to the world to try to come to the help of the people of Gaza who live under extreme conditions. They live, they are poor, and they are attacked more often than not by the occupying forces. They have to live on the minimum because obviously even the minimum does not exist. Okay, so you can tell a great deal from the title. A letter from Gaza can be telling you about the theme or different themes that the short story is about. Lots of examples. Okay, so let's now move to symbols. Again, symbols can tell you a great deal about the theme or themes of a short story. So what's a symbol? Let's first of all define what a symbol is. So a symbol is an object that stands for an idea. Okay. Lots of things. Think of Arabic, for example. Think of the coins that the two Englishmen were like counting in Arabic, in the Bazaar Arabic, in the short story Arabic. And of course, when you have money and you have concern with money in a short story, it gives you an indication that people are obsessed with money, that people are in love with money, that there is that the specters of materialism and the worshipping of Mammon, the god of money, are looming on the horizon. And this is what is exactly happening in Arabic, where the main concern of the people, the adult people in the short story, is with money. Okay, they don't care very much about other abstract stuff like love, romance, fellow feeling. Okay. Let me again. I'll take also from Arabic. I'll read and extract from Arabic, and let's try together to extract the symbols that we have and see whether they have any bearings on the theme or themes of the short story. So this is page 132. If you go all the way to page 132. So 132, when you go there, you have, let me read it. So the wild garden behind the house contained a central apple tree and a few straggling bushes, under one of which I found the late tenant's rusty bicycle pump. Okay. So rusty bicycle. So remember, you're talking about a place that is uninhabited. So rusty can contribute to the idea of stagnation and paralysis that we spoke about before. Okay, but I'm not interested in paralysis now. I'm interested in whether we have symbols, whether we have objects that can stand for ideas, that can represent ideas, that can give us ideas. Okay, so in order to understand also the symbol, you have to set it against other parts of the short story. Remember, this part comes after the part that we have read together about this Richmond street and how blind it is in terms there is a blind end to it and stuff. Okay. So when I say the wild garden, so let's look at garden. Okay, garden, and set it against the short story that we have done together, Arabic. Set it against the different concepts and ideas that we explored in the short story. set it against the idea of, again, paralysis. Set it against the idea of disappointment. Okay? So when you set the word garden against all of that, set it also against the idea of this unrequited love upon the part of the boy. The fact that the lady was like double crossing him, she was deceiving him. She knew that he was in love, and she was like taking advantage of this. When you set all, the word garden against all these things, you're going to come up with the idea that the garden can be a symbol of the Garden of Eden. Okay, can tell you about this biblical garden where you have Adam and Eve living very happily, enjoying life over there, and then comes the devil and starts to insinuate to Adam and Eve and starts to like tempt them to eat from the forbidden tree. And you know what happens next. The fact that because of the fact that they disobeyed God, after the insinuation and the temptation of the devil, they have to fall from grace, and they have to come back to earth, and this is what we refer to as the original sin. So the garden can be just that, the Garden of Eden, and the different characters that we have can be examples of people under the spell of the devil. And one of the tools of the devil here is money. They are so engaged and so absorbed and obsessed with the idea of money, to the total neglect of any other qualities. So obviously they lost their innocence. They are not innocent anymore, and they are cursed in one way or another. Okay? So the garden here is a reference to just that. So it can be a symbol, and it can also be a biblical reference. It can be a reference or an allusion to a biblical happening or an event. So the wild garden behind the house contained a central apple tree. Apple tree. So you have an apple tree. So the word apple reinforces our impressions that the garden can be the Garden of Eden and what happened over there. So had the writer chosen any other tree, an orange tree or a peach tree, we wouldn't have taken it that far, and we spoke about the garden, the biblical Garden of Eden and stuff like that. Okay, so what helped us here come up with this idea of the biblical reference and the symbolism that this part has is that the other elements of the quotation or the extract contributes to that, or contribute to that. So the apple tree, so the forbidden apple, and what happened when Adam obeyed his wife Eve and disobeyed God and ate forbidden apple. Okay, but this is an example of symbolism. So symbols here. So the symbol here, the basic symbol here in this part is the Garden of Eden and the fall from grace, which entails the loss of innocence upon the part of Adam and Eve, and upon the part of the people in the short story. So obviously the only innocent person or character in the short story is the 13-year-old boy, okay, who is amazed and surprised at what happens around him and how materialistic people got to be. See, this is again an example of symbolism, and that can help you tell a great deal. So what kind of themes can you come out if you read a part like that against the other parts? So it can give you ideas about material cupidity, the fact that people are in love with money and material stuff, the loss of innocence, okay, how unfeeling adult people are towards children and innocent kids, okay, and then we move to allusions as one of the things that can tell you about the theme. And like we said, allusions are reference to history, to mythology, to religion, to literature, okay? And this is, it apply here if I mean the same extract that we have just read can also tell you, can be a reference, can be an allusion. Like I said, the garden and the apple tree. The apple tree can be a reference to the forbidden tree, right? Let me, I think, yeah. If you're familiar with a poem called The Waste Land by T.S. Eliot, this poem is full of allusions. Allusions and references to mythology, to religion, to other cultures, to other pieces of literature. This is an excellent example of, I even encourage you to read it. Yeah, it's a little bit highbrowish and difficult, but it's worth it. It's like I'm telling you, it's an excellent example of a piece of literary work that has so many allusions and references from outside the work itself. And then you have metaphors and similes, and they can also tell you about the short story, the theme or themes of a short story. Okay, so you know what a metaphor is. So a metaphor is when two objects or two things are directly compared to each other. When I say, for example, that love is a red rose, so I'm comparing love to roses in terms of how beautiful roses are. And it can also, roses can be thorny as well. So love can be sweet, and it can also be sour, okay? Similes, when you compare two things using like and as. When, say, for example, she runs like the wind, so which is an indication that she is very fast. Okay? This is we identify the theme or themes of a short story. On this note, and with this item, we come to the end of this part. Next time, inshallah, we will deal, or we'll do the second part, which is the application part, where we are going to explore the ideas that we have spoken about here, about the theme to the short story, The Scarlet Ibis by James Hurst. Until then, wish you good luck. Bye bye.